everybody. Jonathan Doyle with you once again. Welcome back to the Daily Podcast, my friends. Working through a fascinating series of listener questions over the next, maybe week or so. 2 weeks of episodes are going to be covering questions straight from you guys, which is really great. And as I've mentioned in the last few episodes, it is a revelatory experience in the sense that it reminds me of just how similar are the challenges and opportunities for growth that we all face. Welcome aboard if you're a new listener. I know many of you have been on the journey with me for a long time, so thank you so much for your faithfulness and loyalty. I get to meet, so many of you being back on the speaking circuit again. So if I haven't met you in person, hopefully I'll get to an event soon and we'll get to meet up. But thanks to everybody, new listeners, please make sure you've subscribed. Hit that subscribe button. And for everybody, please go and check out the show notes. All the links are there. You can get a free copy of my book. You can book me to speak. You can book me for coaching. You can check out Karen's MasterClass for women. So if you happen to be a woman, go and check out that link to Karen's Masterclass. She works with women all around the world. It's a great program, so go check that out today. We are responding to a listener question, as I have mentioned, and we are dealing with a topic that is arguably the most popular topic, sadly, in my podcast sort of history, because I look at some of the diagnostics, and we've covered this maybe a month or two ago, and it was very popular, and on YouTube as well. It was really popular, and it's really getting back to the topic of toxic people. And the listener question was, they said to me, how do I deal with people who want to bring you down, fill you with fear, and blame you for being the aggressor? You'd be so proud of me, everybody. I just thought of, those of you that know the show well know that I have strong libertarian leanings, and I felt that question was describing a lot of our current political social experience, but I'm going to restrain myself from going down that rabbit hole. But we're talking about toxic people, the kind of people who enjoy bringing us down, being negative, being critical, using fear, and then, of course, blame you for being the aggressor, which I guess is the concept of gaslighting, which is, if you're not familiar with it, is kind of convincing somebody that they did or said something that they genuinely didn't do and messing with their mind so that they begin to wonder whether they did it or not. And tragically, gaslighting has led to some absolutely awful outcomes, people making tragic decisions about their own lives based on being gaslit. So here we are, friends, in the realm of toxic people. A few thoughts on this. Many of us are dealing with this in different times in life, most often in the work context. A lot of other places, you can be more selective and you can avoid it, but it's traditionally the workplace or different organizations that we can belong to. We'll be running to people who seem to not only desire, to cause harm, but genuinely enjoy it. And one thought I've had is the kind of sad and tragic unraveling of aspects of our social fabric. So kind of, the impact of technology in some ways, the impact upon families, parenting, a whole bunch of technological factors, I would suggest, are probably going to see a lot more of this before we see less of it. The kind of cohesion, the social cohesion, the bonds of relationships and social belonging that have marked our species since we emerged as Homo sapiens sapiens about 350,000 years ago. Many of those have been profoundly under pressure, definitely since the Industrial Revolution in the 1860s, but the kind of factors that held communities and people together are really broken, and we're seeing this incredible atomization of culture where, so many young people, of course, are being raised digitally, and lack of exposure to nature and extended family and all these factors that are making, I guess, growing up in a really healthy, spiritually and socially adjusted way more difficult than it may have been at other times in history. So what do we do with that, knowing that we're probably going to see more of it rather than less? And by more of it, I mean, I think we're going to see more damaged people. I think we're going to see more people who have experienced some pretty difficult parenting, difficult social situations, and that lack of formation is going to play out. So what do we do about it? People that want to bring us down, fill us with fear, and blame you for being the aggressor. I said in a recent episode, when you find yourself in a situation where this kind of thing is happening, there's three options, and it is a real, I keep revisiting this because I think it's a really good summation of where our decision-making and agency can lie in life. And it's, you can either leave a situation, change the situation, or accept the situation. So this is really worth holding on to that as we go through life and we encounter different experiences. So you're in a workplace, you're somewhere with somebody who is, is really ticking that box for toxic behavior, and on this, you're going to have a spectrum here, right? You're going to have a spectrum from just difficult people with poor social skills all the way to full-blown sociopathy and narcissistic personality disorder. My gosh, it seems very common, like much more common than it once might have been. Like, I think there was always sociopaths and narcissists floating around, but there seems to be a lot more of it lately. I think we're seeing a fair bit of it in certain political figures across the spectrum. This isn't really a left or right thing. I think we're seeing it in different places. People whose obsession with self and with self-promotion is highly destructive. So we're looking at that spectrum, right? Through experiencing somebody and thinking to yourself, you know what, I just don't vibe with this person. I just not my bag, all the way to people who enjoy causing harm, and that's pretty much sociopathy. From my understanding, sociopaths do not understand that their behaviors harm others. So they think they're being normal, but they cannot process or understand that the way that they live, behave, speak, interact causes harm. So they're dangerous because they just don't get it. They just don't even see it. All the way through to psychopathy, which is people who genuinely enjoy causing pain. Hopefully none of us, regularly encounter somebody in that category, but we definitely encounter people somewhere from slightly annoying to narcissistic personality disorder. So here's our options. We leave it, we accept it, or we change it. Now, the core response would be, well, Jonathan, you don't know my situation. It's not possible for me to leave this situation. I can't financially, I can't. I kind of get it. I took Olivia out, my daughter, to a movie the other day. It's a French movie. We try and show her a lot of really interesting international films. It's a French subtitle film called Full Time. It's about this woman who has two young kids, a relationship's broken down. She's working in Paris as a head chambermaid in an exclusive hotel, and just the pressure that she's under, the financial strain, the physical strain, the time strain. And it's a brilliant film. I really recommend seeing it if you can find it. It's called Full Time. And it's a great snapshot into the reality that there are. And I said this to Olivia on the way home. I said, there are plenty of people, and I said they're just under so much pressure that they can't easily leave a situation. So I'm honestly not sure how to answer that, because I think if situations are genuinely toxic, there really is a trade-off that has to be made. The trade-off between financial imperatives and other relational, social imperatives. You could be working in a job where you're making really good money, but you're dealing with really awful people that are wrecking your life, and you're bringing that stuff home with you. And ultimately what has to be done is an evaluation of it's a cost-benefit analysis, right? It's trade-offs. It's like you're placing a particular value upon the money, and I'm not judging anybody. I don't know anybody's circumstance, and it could be an accurate evaluation all the way through to you're just not prepared to let it go. And in your hierarchy, whether consciously or unconsciously, you're placing the finance ahead of the crucial relationships in your life. So that's the first thing we got to really look at. If we're dealing with really awful people who are making our lives unbearable, that stuff comes home with us, that stuff affects us. So we have to prayerfully, intelligently consider that truth. I think often in that circumstance we can absolutize things. We can just get in a point where we're like, I can't leave, it's impossible to leave. So I really encourage people to critique that story. Sometimes it's, and again in this movie Full Time, when everything eventually falls apart, there's like this small island of refuge where all the insane living stops for a moment because it was all taken away from her. And you see this kind of, she suddenly found a moment's peace, realizing that everything that she'd thought that was so utterly crucial to her life wasn't. And she couldn't see what the future was going to bring, but there was this moment, it was quite beautifully done in the film, where she suddenly realised that stuff was over. So all of this is my way of saying to us all, you got to really evaluate what's most important in your life. And if you're staying somewhere for the money or the promotions or whatever else, you got to weigh that up, because if it's wrecking your health and the relational, emotional health of the people you love, nothing's worth that. It really isn't. Nothing's worth that. People filling you with fear. This is the question here where she says, what do I do with people that fill you with fear? I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt that famously said, no one can make me feel anything unless I give them permission. It's a powerful quote, isn't it? She says, no one can make me feel anything unless I give them permission. I don't know what I think about that. What do you think about that? Like, people can act in ways that can really impact us, right? But she's sort of saying that we don't have to give away our power to people. We don't have to let them take that control. And again, this question today is pretty general, so I don't know the specifics of this person's circumstance. But there's definitely people that can intimidate, that can be, really seeking power. And I don't know how much you can do with that. I remember the first job I ever worked when I graduated, there was this one guy who was pretty much the organizational, the office psychopath, as they say. I had this idea to try something innovative, and I remember him kind of walking up in my space and getting in my physical space and basically trying to intimidate me. And I'm like, is this a thing? People really do this? Like, I get it. I get that they can do it. So what are my options? Back in that circumstance, options, leave, accept, or change. I chose to leave. I chose to find a much better place that opened up new doors, and I just left. I just went somewhere else. Because I'm not really, I don't see our employment as often the place where we need to change others. Because creating change in others, firstly, people have to want to change. It's incredibly hard to change people that don't want to change. It's very stressful, and it takes a lot of energy, and they rarely say thank you, and you got to weigh up if that's worth it, right? So if people are filling you with fear, leave, accept, or change. And I don't think you can accept that, and I don't think you can stay under that. So I think if people are emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, or physically intimidating you and driving fear into you, you have to be somewhere else. So I would say you would need, my sense is that you would need to leave that situation. And again, I don't know the specifics here, so just take that for what it's worth. And the gaslighting, where they say blame you for being the aggressor, that's basically psychological harm, right? Like, you can't walk into a workplace and just physically hit somebody. You get fired and possibly arrested. But to gaslight somebody, to treat them terribly and then turn it around and say that they're treating, that you're treating them terribly, that's psychological damage. Humans aren't designed for that. We're not designed to get messed up with that way. One of the basic things that they do in torture and deprivation stuff, I remember reading about this in, novels and historical books around special forces training. One of the things they do is they try and test soldiers in case they're captured, right? And they do sleep deprivation, and then they keep messing with their heads. They keep saying one thing, doing another, changing the parameters and the environment all the time. And one of the quickest ways to destabilize people is to do that. So having said all that, this is a happy episode, isn't it? I don't know if you can be there. So I would encourage you to, it is possible to find environments that are positive, that are full of light, that are full of good people, where you want to be, where you're appreciated. So again, I don't know here whether you're talking about a work context or a social, relational, family context. I guess if it's a relational context or a family context, there's the possibility of a discussion, of calling this stuff out and saying, hey, you're really critical, you're really negative, you keep criticizing me, I need you to stop, you intimidate me, I don't like it. At least you can have that conversation, don't put yourself in any risk, but, often in the workplace, and look, and again, to the workplace question, a lot of places have systems, right? A lot of, have systems and ways that you can send things up the chain. Most organizations now are quite concerned about the kind of litigation and problems that can come from this. So again, without knowing your exact circumstance, it's hard to say, but if there is a system you can use, then use that system. If it's a family or relational situation, then is it possible to risk the very difficult conversation that obviously needs to happen here? But again, if it's a dangerous situation anyway, I think you would be best to exit that as quickly as possible. So friends, for all of us listening who don't experience that sort of thing, I would say that, behind all of what I'm saying is the belief that we are allowed to be happy, that we are allowed to be in places where we feel, appreciated, places where our gifts are recognized and we get to use them. So for all of us dealing with really toxic, difficult people, I would say to you, weigh up the cost-benefit analysis, weigh up the on costs, the kind of other effects on your health, your outside relationships, your family, your parenting, and ask yourself, do I need to make some changes here? So leave, change, or accept, friends. Leave, change, or accept. Okay, I hope that's useful. Let me know what you think, guys. You can jump on the YouTube channel, leave some comments there on this episode. You can email me, jonathan@jonathandoyle.co. This has been the Daily Podcast. Please make sure you're subscribed, and I'm going to have another message for you tomorrow.